Babysitting isn't childcare. It's hostage negotiation with crayons. One minute you're bribing a toddler with goldfish crackers, the next you're Googling, can a 3-year-old legally unionize? Parents will hand you their kids with a smile like they're passing off a scented candle, when in reality you're inheriting a pint-sized chaos engine that runs on sugar, sticky fingers, and a complete disregard for physics. And just when you think you've seen the worst, the tantrum, the spaghetti in the DVD player, the mysterious puddle with no origin story, trust me, you haven't. Because the truly unhinged babysitter stories, those are still coming. 1. A babysitter once caught a toddler dipping chicken nuggets into a toilet bowl like it was some kind of DIY ranch fountain. When asked why, the kid shrugged and said, "The water's free." And honestly, that's capitalism in its purest form. No overpriced Chick-fil-A sauce packets here. Just the bold entrepreneurial spirit of a 3-year-old turning bathroom plumbing into fine dining. The sitter tried to explain germs, but the kid just stared at them like they were the idiot for not knowing toilets are obviously soup bowls for nuggets. Forget Michelin stars. This was the Michelin flush. 2. One babysitter walked into the living room to find the child calmly giving their goldfish CPR. The fish wasn't choking. It wasn't struggling. It was just swimming, until the kid decided it needed help breathing. So out of the tank it came, onto the carpet receiving chest compressions with the accuracy of a toddler who's seen one too many episodes of Paw Patrol. The sitter rushed to save it, but by then, the fish had experienced more healthcare malpractice than a Florida retirement home. The child's explanation? "I'm a doctor." And that's how Nemo got his medical degree revoked. 3. A kid once decided the babysitter was unfit for duty and locked them out of the house. Full-on coup d'etat. The sitter had to stand outside, calling through the window like a peasant begging their tiny landlord for entry. The child, age 5, sat on the couch sipping juice like a Bond villain, declaring, "You're fired." This wasn't babysitting anymore. It was the world's smallest HR termination. The parents got home 2 hours later and laughed. Meanwhile, the sitter had spent the evening Googling, "How much jail time do you get for breaking into a house you're paid to be in?" 4. A babysitter caught a child eating an entire stick of butter like it was a candy bar. No toast, no pancakes, just raw dairy to the face. When confronted, the kid said, "It tastes like ice cream if you believe hard enough." And that's the kind of blind optimism America was built on. Forget green smoothies or gluten-free diets. This kid was basically doing keto on nightmare mode. By the time the parents got home, the butter stick was gone, and the kid was vibrating like a greased-up hummingbird. The sitter just sat there, traumatized, wondering if cholesterol could be airborne. 5. One sitter made the mistake of agreeing to play house. Except in this version, the child announced, "I'm the daddy," and immediately grounded the babysitter for bad behavior. The punishment? Sitting in a corner while the child made them a fake dinner of plastic peas and invisible soup. The sitter complied for 30 minutes until realizing they were essentially being bullied by a preschool dictator who thought discipline was a cuisine. The parents came home to find their babysitter still in timeout. Imagine explaining to adults that their 4-year-old staged a successful authoritarian takeover. Forget role play. This was role dystopia. 6. A babysitter once had to explain to a 6-year-old that no, you cannot train the dog to use the toilet by flushing toys down it first. The child insisted this was how dog school worked, then proudly demonstrated with 3 Matchbox cars and 1 Barbie shoe. By the time the sitter intervened, the bathroom looked like a crime scene where Fisher-Price had been murdered. The kid was furious, claiming the sitter didn't believe in education. Honestly though, the logic tracks. Schools are where toys go to die. Just ask any 3rd grader with a broken fidget spinner. 7. During a thunderstorm, one child became convinced they were being personally targeted by Zeus. Every clap of thunder was, in their words, the sky yelling at me. So they demanded the babysitter write an apology letter to the clouds, and not just a quick note. A 3-page essay on why I won't be bad again, signed and dated. The babysitter read it out loud to the window like a hostage video while the child nodded solemnly. The storm passed, but the sitter had basically been recruited into a weather cult led by a 6-year-old. Zeus remains unimpressed. 8. A babysitter once discovered that silence in a house isn't golden, it's a crime scene. The child was in the bathroom, having fully painted the walls with toothpaste. Not streaks, not doodles. Full Jackson Pollock in minty green. When asked why, the kid shrugged and said, "I'm making art that smells nice." Somewhere, Picasso rolled in his grave, while Colgate rolled in cash. The sitter spent an hour scrubbing the bathroom, while the kid proudly declared themselves an inventor. Honestly, this is how every bad startup begins. Good intentions, catastrophic execution, and a bathroom that smells like dental shame. 9. A babysitter walked into the kitchen to find the kid cutting their own hair with safety scissors. Half a head of hair gone, zero regret. The child looked up, grinning like a mad scientist, and said, "Now I look like a YouTuber." Which, disturbingly, they kind of did. The sitter tried damage control with hats, headbands, and eventually the bold move of denial. When the parents came home, their first words were, "What happened here?" And all the sitter could say was, "Fashion happened." Somewhere in Brooklyn, a barber cried out in spiritual pain. 10. One babysitter spent an entire evening trying to prevent a toddler from feeding spaghetti to the family's DVD player. The kid was absolutely convinced it was a mouth that needed dinner. After the third attempt, the sitter realized this wasn't misbehavior, it was performance art. By the end of the night, Finding Nemo had marinara sauce fingerprints, the DVD tray refused to close, and the babysitter had accepted their fate as the worst line cook in cinematic history. The parents later asked, "Did you stop him?" And the sitter just laughed, hollow and broken. Stop him? The spaghetti won. 11. A kid once asked the babysitter if Santa was real. Standard stuff. But when the sitter tried to give the classic, "Well, what do you think?" answer, the child went full IRS auditor. If he's real, show me the receipts. Where does he get the money? Who funds the elves? By the end, the sitter was sweating like a politician at a press conference. The interrogation ended with the child announcing, "You're lying, and I'll tell my lawyer." This wasn't babysitting anymore. It was a congressional hearing chaired by a 7-year-old with milk mustache authority. 12. A babysitter once caught a toddler filling the dishwasher with apple juice. When asked why, the kid simply explained, "Dishes get thirsty too." And honestly, who's to argue? From their perspective, you drink juice, you survive. Why wouldn't plates? By the time the sitter stopped them, the entire dishwasher was one cycle away from becoming a $700 fruit punch machine. The child beamed with pride, waiting for praise, while the babysitter quietly accepted they'd just watched a kitchen appliance develop diabetes. Meanwhile, the parents later shrugged and said, "Oh, that happens sometimes." Happens. Sometimes. 13. One babysitter left the room for 2 minutes. 2. When they returned, the kid had constructed a tower of chairs, pillows, and sheer arrogance, announcing it was their castle. At the top, a juice box throne. The sitter, fearing for their life, begged them to come down. The child refused, demanding to be addressed as King Awesome before any negotiations could continue. The babysitter eventually bribed them with gummy bears, proving once again that every monarchy is just one snack away from collapse. And when the parents asked how the night went, the sitter muttered, "Your Highness was merciful." 14. A babysitter once asked a child to put on pajamas. Simple request. The kid came back 20 minutes later fully naked, except for socks and a Batman mask. When asked why, they replied, "Batman doesn't wear pajamas." You can't argue with that kind of logic. It's airtight. The sitter tried again, but the child leapt onto the couch shouting, "I am the knight!" Which was ironic, because it was only 7:30 p.m. and bedtime was a war crime in their Gotham. The sitter gave up and tucked Batman in, socks and all. Justice was served. Poorly. 15. A babysitter once discovered a child trying to microwave crayons. The reasoning? "I want rainbow soup." The result? A kitchen that looked like a Lisa Frank nightmare melted onto every surface. The sitter spent the next hour scraping neon wax off the microwave tray while the child explained in great detail that they were inventing a new kind of food. And honestly, considering modern TikTok recipes, rainbow soup could probably go viral. By the time the parents returned, the house smelled like chemical Skittles, and the kid proudly presented them with a bowl of hardened crayon chunks. Bon appetit. 16. One sitter caught a kid hiding all the spoons in the freezer. Every spoon in the house. When asked why, the child said, "Cold spoons taste better." This is the kind of psychotic culinary philosophy Gordon Ramsay hasn't even cursed at yet. By the time the sitter found them, the child had created a black market operation, rationing frozen spoons like they were rare Pokemon cards. Parents came home, opened the silverware drawer, and screamed. The kid just shrugged, spoon in mouth, like a connoisseur at a Michelin star ice utensil tasting. Somewhere, Martha Stewart fainted. 17. A babysitter once discovered the kid's art project was carving into the living room wall with a fork. When asked what they were doing, the child proudly announced, "I'm making caves for my dinosaurs." And honestly, the dedication was impressive. A full Paleolithic excavation happening in real time, with cutlery as the tool of choice. The babysitter tried to stop them, but the child wailed, "You hate creativity!" So now the drywall had velociraptor housing units, the babysitter had a migraine, and the parents had a repair bill big enough to qualify as a down payment. Prehistoric times indeed. 18. A babysitter once found a kid quietly licking the TV screen. Not just once. Full-on, slow-motion, wide-eyed licking like a documentary on human weirdness. When asked why, the child explained with total confidence, "It tastes like SpongeBob." And look, I don't know what kind of hallucinogenic cereal this child was on, but apparently Nickelodeon transmits flavor now. The sitter tried to intervene, only to be told, "You don't understand cartoons." Which, fine. Maybe I don't. But last time I checked, licking electronics isn't a food group. Somewhere out there, this kid is either a food critic or on a first-name basis with their electrician. 19. A babysitter once walked in on a kid brushing their teeth with ranch dressing. Toothpaste was apparently too spicy. The child explained that ranch made their mouth feel cool and creamy. So now we've got kids out here treating Hidden Valley like it's Colgate, casually preparing for a future where every dentist visit ends with a priest performing an exorcism. The sitter, horrified, tried to confiscate the bottle, only to be accused of tooth abuse. By the time the parents got home, the kid's mouth smelled like a chicken wing platter, and the babysitter was reconsidering every career choice that led them here. 20. One babysitter caught a kid carefully taping slices of cheese to the ceiling. No reason, no goal, just craft singles stuck overhead like a surrealist art installation. When asked why, the child simply said, "It makes the house happier." And honestly, I can't argue with that. A ceiling full of dairy does have a certain whimsical charm, at least until it starts dripping orange goo at 3 a.m. The sitter tried to remove them, but the kids screamed about ruining the magic. So the cheese stayed, and the babysitter left, wondering if they'd just witnessed the birth of the next Banksy or a dairy-related haunting. 21. A babysitter once watched in horror as a child tried to vacuum up milk. Not spilled milk on the floor, an actual glass of milk poured directly into the vacuum. The logic? It's thirsty. By the time the sitter ripped the cord out of the wall, the machine was gurgling like a dying cow, and the child was clapping like they'd solved world hunger. The babysitter spent the next hour praying to the warranty gods, while the kid proudly announced they'd invented drink cleaning technology. Forget Dyson, forget Roomba. The real innovation is a Hoover that smells like sour dairy for the rest of its short, tragic life. 22. One sitter discovered a kid trying to flush Legos down the toilet to build a city underwater. The babysitter explained that toilets don't work like aquariums, but the child just shook their head with the smug confidence of a Silicon Valley startup CEO. "You just don't get innovation," they said, watching another Lego man spiral into the abyss. By the time the sitter gave up, the plumbing was on strike. The toilet sounded like it was swallowing secrets, and the babysitter was calculating how much prison time you get for pretending you never saw anything. Somewhere, a plumber sensed a disturbance in the force. 23. A babysitter once caught a kid drawing eyebrows on the family dog with a Sharpie. The dog looked permanently shocked, like it had just seen the stock market crash. When asked why, the child insisted the dog needed to be more expressive. And honestly, that's art direction I wasn't prepared for. The sitter scrubbed for an hour, but Sharpie doesn't forgive. The parents came home, looked at their dog, and just sighed. Because once your Labrador has cartoon villain eyebrows, you don't own a pet anymore. You own a punchline. The dog, meanwhile, didn't care. It had snacks, expression achieved. 24. A babysitter found a child putting ketchup on Oreos. Not dipping, topping, like it was some kind of gourmet appetizer at a cursed dinner party. When asked why, the kid said, "It's red frosting." And listen, at that point the sitter didn't even argue. Because honestly, who are we to judge a child boldly uniting two cultural pillars of American cuisine? Junk food and bad decisions. The kid ate 5 of them before announcing, "I don't feel good." Really? You don't say. The sitter spent the rest of the night Googling, "Can you die from Oreo lasagna?" while the child took a victory nap. 25. One sitter walked into the kitchen to find a kid cooking. The recipe? A bowl filled with water, cat food, chocolate syrup, and toothpaste. The child proudly announced it was soup for aliens. When the sitter said no one would eat that, the kid said, "That's because you're not from space." So now the babysitter was apparently hosting the first intergalactic dinner party starring Gordon Ramsay's nightmares. The sitter tried to throw it out, but the child wailed like they'd just destroyed the Mona Lisa. The parents got home later, saw the sludge, and said, "Oh, he's been doing that a lot lately." A lot. 26. A babysitter once found a child standing in the yard, arms outstretched, yelling, "I am charging my powers from the sun." They stood like that for 40 minutes. The sitter tried to coax them inside, but the kid insisted they were almost at 100% battery. Somewhere between superhero and iPhone, this child had fully merged fantasy and tech. Finally, when the parents came home, the kid ran up and shouted, "Look, I'm solar-powered now," which is ironic because 5 minutes later they passed out from dehydration. The sitter just muttered, "Green energy my ass," and went inside for a drink. 27. A babysitter once noticed the child had been unusually quiet, always a bad sign. They walked into the living room to find every single cushion in the house stacked into one towering fortress. The child was sitting at the top, wearing sunglasses, and declared, "This is my throne." The sitter told them to come down, and the kid calmly replied, "Peasants may not speak to me without tribute." Tribute in this case meant juice boxes. The sitter gave in just to prevent a collapse. So yes, the evening ended with a babysitter serving Capri Sun to a 5-year-old dictator of upholstery. 28. One kid spent an entire babysitting session convinced the sitter was a robot. They poked them, clapped in their face, even shouted, "Activate," like they were waiting for Siri to wake up. When the babysitter finally asked why, the child whispered, "Because you blink weird." That was the whole evidence. A slightly unusual blink rate. For the rest of the night, the babysitter had to pretend they weren't an undercover cyborg while being watched like a malfunctioning toaster. The parents came home, asked how it went, and the kid immediately screamed, "Don't trust them, they're a machine." Thanks, kid. Appreciate the reference letter. 29. A babysitter once had to physically stop a kid from trying to mail themselves to Disneyland. The child had packed a cardboard box with snacks, crayons, and a handwritten note reading, "Delivered to Mickey Mouse." When asked how they expected to breathe, the child explained they'd poke air holes. You know, like all the best international smuggling operations. The sitter dismantled the plan, but not before realizing this child had essentially invented the world's least efficient kidnapping. And honestly, with today's shipping prices, it would have been cheaper to just buy the ticket. But no, this kid trusted USPS more than Southwest. 30. One babysitter turned around for 2 minutes. 2. By the time they looked back, the kid had dumped an entire bag of flour across the kitchen floor and was rolling in it like a sugar-covered demon. When asked what in God's name they were doing, the child grinned and said, "I'm a donut." Not pretending to be. Not dressing up as. Number. They were a donut now. The babysitter gave up trying to clean and just accepted they were living in the world's saddest Krispy Kreme. The parents came home, saw the flour storm, and didn't even ask. That's the sign of veterans. 31. A babysitter once discovered a child had decided the family cat was now a horse. The poor cat had a jump rope reins, a towel saddle, and the expression of someone considering witness protection. When the sitter tried to intervene, the child screamed, "She loves it." The cat, meanwhile, was plotting murder. By the time the sitter freed it, the cat had sworn revenge. The babysitter had scratches in places they didn't know could be scratched, and the child was sulking about ruining the rodeo. Somewhere in the distance, the cat was sharpening its claws like Liam Neeson in Taken. 32. A babysitter once caught a kid eating raw spaghetti straight from the box, just crunching down like it was a party snack. When asked why, the kid shrugged and said, "It's just skinny chips." And honestly, that's not even wrong. The sitter, horrified, tried to stop them, but the kid doubled down, crunching each piece like a monster in a pretzel commercial. By the time the parents got home, half the box was gone, and the sitter had accepted that carbs apparently don't require cooking anymore. Somewhere, an Italian grandmother fainted, and the child proudly announced they'd invented new food. 33. One babysitter found a child attempting to give Barbie CPR. Noble goal, except their method involved repeatedly slamming the doll into the floor and screaming, "Live! Live!" The sitter tried to gently explain that's not how CPR works, but the child was unconvinced. "That's how they do it on TV," they said, which, to be fair, is also how every medical drama operates. The babysitter spent the rest of the night comforting a traumatized Barbie who had been beaten into immortality. By the time the parents got home, Barbie was lying face down on the couch and the child was plotting medical school. 34. A babysitter once walked into the bathroom to find a kid dunking cookies into the toilet. When asked why, the child looked dead serious and said, "It's milk for big kids." The babysitter nearly fainted, trying to explain that toilets are not, in fact, dairy products. The kid rolled their eyes like the sitter was the idiot in this scenario. And the worst part? They actually ate one. Full bite, no hesitation. The babysitter gagged, the kid grinned, and somewhere, Oreo's entire marketing team quit their jobs. If that isn't proof children are tiny chaos demons, nothing is. 35. A babysitter once found a kid trying to bake cookies by putting Play-Doh on a radiator. The child insisted it would melt into dessert. Instead, the house smelled like burnt kindergarten. The sitter tried to intervene, but the child screamed about ruining the recipe. By the time the parents got home, the radiator looked like a crime scene at Crayola headquarters, and the sitter had to explain that no, the cookies weren't edible unless you considered chemical poisoning a flavor profile. Somewhere in Italy, a chef cried, and somewhere in America, someone probably sold the idea on Etsy for $29.99. 36. One babysitter discovered a child had eaten half a bottle of glitter glue. Not tasted, not licked, eaten. When asked why, the kid smiled proudly and said, "Now I sparkle inside," which is poetic, but also exactly how emergency room nurses develop drinking problems. The sitter called poison control, only to be told, "Yeah, that happens more than you'd think." More than you'd think? How many children are out here trying to become Twilight vampires by mainlining arts and craft supplies? The kid was fine, but probably pooped rainbows for a week. And honestly, that's the kind of glitter bomb no one wants. 37. A babysitter once caught a child trying to sell the family dog on eBay. Listing price, $5 and a juice box. When the sitter asked why, the kid explained, "He barks too much, and I need snacks." Cold, ruthless, a preschool Jeff Bezos. The sitter had to wrestle the laptop away before a very confused stranger in Ohio bought a Labrador like it was a used blender. The parents came home and said, "Oh, he's entrepreneurial." Entrepreneurial? Number. That's organized crime in training wheels. If you're casually flipping pets online, Wall Street's gonna love you by age 9. 38. A babysitter once had to stop a kid from trying to email Santa by physically shoving the family iPad into the mailbox. When told it didn't work that way, the child rolled their eyes and said, "You're just old." "Excuse me? Old?" "No, I just understand how Wi-Fi works," which apparently puts me centuries ahead of this little caveman. The sitter had to fish a $600 iPad out of a sticky metal box filled with junk mail and despair. When the parents got home, the kid told them the babysitter hates Christmas. Yeah, nothing says holiday cheer like AppleCare fraud. 39. A babysitter once walked into the kitchen to find a child covering the entire floor in maple syrup. Not spilled, poured. When asked why, the child proudly announced, "Now it's an ice rink." The sitter, standing ankle-deep in sticky chaos, tried to explain that hockey requires ice, not Aunt Jemima. The child wasn't listening. They were already sliding across the linoleum like Wayne Gretzky on a sugar bender. By the time the parents got home, the house looked like a crime scene at IHOP. And the babysitter? Still peeling their socks off the floor. The Zamboni has PTSD. 40. One babysitter had to talk a child out of swallowing marbles because they thought it would make them sound like a robot. The sitter screamed, confiscated the bag, and the child cried because robots are cooler than humans, which is ironic because the kid was already acting like ChatGPT with a sugar high. By the end of the night, the sitter was Googling how to convince a 6-year-old they're not AI. And honestly, considering half the things kids say, I'm not convinced they aren't just unpatched software bugs in tiny human bodies. Somewhere, Boston Dynamics is taking notes. 41. A babysitter once found a kid proudly eating cat litter. Why? Because the cat does it. First of all, no, it doesn't. Second, why would that even be a selling point? The sitter rushed in, horrified, while the child argued, "You eat cereal, I eat this." Honestly, if logic worked like that, half of America would already be dead. The parents came home, heard the story, and said, "Oh, he's just curious." Curious? Curious is asking why the sky is blue. Curious is not shoving tidy cats into your mouth like it's Cinnamon Toast Crunch. That's not curiosity. That's Darwinism. 42. A babysitter once had to stop a child from shaving their eyebrows off with a disposable razor. When asked why, the child confidently declared, "I want to look surprised forever." And honestly, that's visionary. Imagine committing your entire face to permanent shock. The sitter saved them at the last second, but the damage was done. One eyebrow half gone, the other intact, leaving the child looking like they'd just heard a scandalous rumor about their own reflection. The parents walked in, gasped, and then shrugged like it was Tuesday. Somewhere, Mona Lisa smirked in solidarity. 43. One babysitter caught a kid trying to train their goldfish by putting it on the couch and throwing Cheerios at it. The child insisted the fish would learn tricks if it had snacks. When the sitter pointed out fish can't eat Cheerios, the child gasped and whispered, "You're mean." Mean? No, mean is forcing a freshwater animal into what is essentially Navy SEAL training for breakfast cereal. The sitter returned the fish to its tank while the child sobbed about ruining its career. And to this day, that goldfish probably still has flashbacks every time it sees dry cereal. 44. A babysitter once realized a kid had flushed their mom's wedding ring down the toilet. When asked why, the child cheerfully said, "It looked like pirate treasure." So yes, an entire lifelong symbol of commitment is now lost in the city's sewer system because a toddler wanted to LARP as Jack Sparrow. The sitter nearly fainted. The parents nearly fainted harder. And the child? Still confused why adults care so much about shiny circles. Somewhere, a sewer rat just got engaged. Honestly, I'd pay good money to see the wedding registry on that one. 45. A babysitter once caught a kid trying to charge their stuffed animal with an iPhone cable. Not pretend. Fully jammed the cable into the toy and waited. When asked what they were doing, the child said, "His batteries are low." The sitter had to explain stuffed animals don't need charging, which only made the child suspicious. Then why do you charge your phone? And honestly, fair point. The babysitter spent the rest of the night being interrogated by a 6-year-old conspiracy theorist who thought Build-A-Bear was hiding the truth. Somewhere, Elon Musk is taking notes for Tesla. Teddy Edition. 46. One babysitter watched in horror as a child tried to wash the family's TV remote in the sink. When asked why, the kid proudly said, "It was dirty." The sitter yanked it out, dripping water like an electronic corpse, while the kid clapped for their own cleanliness. The parents came home, couldn't turn on Netflix, and the child screamed, "Don't blame me," which is ironic because the sitter was still holding the remote like a drowned rat. To this day, somewhere in that house, a Roku remote is rotting in silence, a martyr for household hygiene. 47. A babysitter once found a child drawing on the walls with ketchup packets. Not crayons, not markers. Heinz 57. The kid proudly announced they were painting with food. The sitter just stared at the wall, dripping in red streaks that looked less like art and more like a homicide scene. When the parents came home, they didn't ask what happened. They just sighed and grabbed paper towels like they'd seen it all before. And honestly, maybe they had. Because once you've raised kids, ketchup graffiti isn't even shocking. It's just Tuesday in tomato-colored hell. 48. A babysitter once had to stop a kid from microwaving their hamster. Yes, you heard me. The child explained they just wanted to make it warm and cozy. Cozy? The sitter almost fainted while sprinting across the room like a linebacker, grabbing the hamster just before the start button got pressed. The child burst into tears, screaming that the sitter hates animals. Number. The sitter just didn't want to explain to the parents why their family pet turned into nuclear fallout. Somewhere, the hamster wrote a thank you note, probably in Morse code, probably from witness protection. 49. A babysitter once caught a kid trying to glue coins to the carpet. Why? Because then I'll always be rich. Genius. Terrible, sticky genius. The babysitter spent hours peeling dimes and nickels out of beige carpet while the child explained their financial strategy like they were Warren Buffett. By the time the parents got home, the babysitter had developed carpal tunnel, And the kid had learned that money really does stick if you believe hard enough. Honestly, it's still a more effective savings account than most banks. 50. One babysitter walked in to find a kid sitting on the counter eating sugar straight from the bag with a spoon. The child turned, face coated in white powder, and said, "Don't worry, it's medicine." Medicine. The babysitter tried to stop them, but the kid hissed like a raccoon guarding a trash can. By the end of the night, the child was sprinting in circles around the house at speeds that should qualify for the Olympics. The sitter just lay on the couch, broken, muttering, "This is how villains are made." And honestly, they weren't wrong. 51. And finally, a babysitter once found a child solemnly sitting in the closet, whispering to themselves. When asked what they were doing, the kid replied, "I'm practicing being invisible." The babysitter laughed until the child added, "It's working. You can't see me." For the rest of the night, the kid refused to acknowledge reality, wandering the house as an invisible person, knocking things over while screaming, "You don't know who did that." And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the truest proof that kids are agents of chaos. They don't just destroy your house, they deny it happened like tiny, sticky-handed politicians. Mic drop. And there you have it. Proof that babysitting isn't childcare. It's surviving a live-action cartoon armed only with juice boxes and regret. Which disaster wins gold? Drop your vote in the comments, share your own horror stories, and if you want more proof that humanity is raising chaos gremlins, you know what to do. Hit like, subscribe, and buckle up.